There's a lot of this around. So, if you're convinced, great. If you're not convinced, fine. You're going to have a lovely future.
Let's have another question. Lady here.
Two questions. Yeah. One is about the flag, but it was wind or something. You didn't mention that. It was the flag, if you just put a flag up, it would just hang down, unless there was wind. And that's the first question. The second question is, why hasn't America, NASA, taken someone else to the moon? Why, for 40 years, if it were correct that they did land on the moon, why would they not be back there to do more research and so on? Those two things to me, always since I've seen programs like the ones you're talking about, it's always made me think, well, it's false.
Okay. Yeah, good question. Well, two questions. Flapping flags, and why haven't they been back? Right. If you're in space, there's no wind, so there shouldn't be a flapping flag. There are 3 points usually that people will bring up to discredit those who might question NASA's achievement, which is, one is there are no stars in the sky of the pictures. Well, of course there aren't, because the camera wouldn't record them. The film isn't sensitive enough, and the shutter speed to record the fully lit foreground will be too short an exposure to record stars. However, there's another point about stars I'll come back to. As far as going back is concerned, in 1492, Columbus discovers America, or rediscovers it. There are people already there, as far as the Europeans are concerned. 30 years later, Spain is in charge of Central America. 1785, Captain Cook discovers Australia, or rediscovers it. 30 years later, Britain shipped its prison population out to Australia. So it's no big deal. 1969, man lands on the moon. 40 years later, he hasn't been back anywhere near the place. And he won't be back for another 15 years, at the present rate. Was it that hard to get to in the first place? Not if we're going to believe the technology of the 1960s. Was it hard to get to the moon? Not if you've got some great fantasists involved who will convince you that these things are possible. So, does that answer the question?
Not the flag.
Sorry, not the flag. Okay.
Views of it, but in both cases, it was moving with wind.
Okay. The only I stand corrected on this, but the only film I have seen of the flag allegedly moving is when the astronauts are actually holding the flagpole and trying to get it into the ground, and they're twisting it, which means that the flag moves.
It's still not to be possible for the flag to be seen like that. We live in the seafront, and we're opposite the flag. When there's no wind, the flag is being literally going like.
There was a metal pole across the top to hold it out. There's a metal pole. It's basically suspended from a horizontal pole and a flagpole. So the horizontal pole is on the flagpole. But when it's twisted like that, it appears to flap. But I've never seen the flag move if nobody's touching it. But I stand corrected. Maybe there will be.
In the video, not just saying the video, it does flap for a while after they take a handle. But that is absolutely Newtonian physics.
Oh, yes.
The things carry on. In fact, until something else stops them. There's no air to stop them. Yeah. So it just carries on flapping. And eventually just loses its own energy through friction with gravity and comes to a standstill.
Yeah.
It behaves absolutely as one would expect. Flag to flap as you twist the pole and then release your hand when there's not a lot of air.
I think Walt Disney knew that as well. But that's another story.
Do we have a question from this side of the room? Because it's all been this side. Yes, Dirk.
Campbell, have you ever managed to get hold of the TV footage?
Yeah. I've seen a lot of TV footage.
So the original TV footage that was supposedly being back from the moon?
Yes.
Right.
And there's a question I would have on that, but I don't know the answer to it.
My question would be, did everything behave as it should have done in 1/6 of the Earth's gravity, like dust coming up?
To be honest, I don't know what things will behave like in 1/6 gravity, because I don't think I've seen it.
Well, you should have seen it, because it was on the TV footage.
That's what we're told.
That's what I mean.
But could this be somebody's idea of what 1/6 gravity will look like? Now, there's a point which is not generally very well known. When the first training of astronauts was taking place here on Earth, they were all suited up and they were trained underwater because it gave the appearance of weightlessness. Or they could weight themselves down so they would have a very small amount of weight. But if you're trying to walk in water, you walk quite slowly because of the resistance of the water. And there is evidence that some of the first Russian EVAs, extravehicular activity, in Earth orbit were actually filmed underwater and projected to show them in space. So if one is used to seeing astronauts moving as if underwater, you're not suddenly going to change that when they get to the moon. So they had to maintain this sort of myth that people move slowly. Because if you've only got 1/6 gravity, no matter how heavy your backpack is, the strength of your legs will still be the same. We saw them jumping. They jump about the same height off the ground as you would on Earth, about 18 inches, about that high. You'd think they'd jump about 6, 7 foot. When Alan Shepard hit his golf ball, you'd think it would fly out of sight. Went about 50 foot. Well, he wasn't a very good club, admittedly, and he wasn't Tiger Woods, but he didn't hit it very hard. The explanation is that it is what we have become so used to.
I mean, the official explanation.
Well,
how come his golf ball only went 50 feet? How come they could only...
Oh, they joke about it and say that he didn't hit it very hard. But you would expect, take anything on the moon. If you get one of your hammers or anything and throw it, but you're in a pretty bulky spacesuit, you should be able to get it quite a distance. But no, they didn't seem to be able to do that. There's a lot that doesn't add up. But because we want to believe that man has achieved this great goal of landing on the moon, and he did it, and there was no danger, nobody died, even though Nixon had a speech specially written if some of them did die. They've gone in peace for all mankind, they're there resting forever in eternity, all that nonsense. He didn't have to use it. There's another point. When you're coming back from the moon, we know how dangerous re-entry into Earth orbit is, because we saw what happened to the space shuttle when it breaks up. It disintegrates. Coming back from the moon, you've got to come back much faster. And you're coming at a much steeper angle. If you don't get that angle spot on, you've got no second chance. You either bounce off the atmosphere and go into orbit around the sun, or you burn up. You've got 40 miles, and that's your corridor. And if you don't get it right, sorry, you're toast. Apollo did it 9 times. Apollo 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, and so on. Right. When they landed, when they got picked up, and there's a picture of the splashdown, that was Apollo 13 actually, that splashdown, they landed with an average of 3 kilometers of the ship there to pick them up. What chance of that? As every single one of them landed within 3 kilometers. I'm sorry, it just doesn't add up. But if you're in a B-52 Stratocruiser or one of these big freighter jobs, and you heave them out the back, you can probably pinpoint your landing point pretty accurately. Now, I'm not saying that's what they did, because there's no evidence for it. But it's a possibility you have to look at.
Someone at the back's been waiting for ages, yeah.
I saw Richard Hoagland some years ago doing a talk, and he worked on NASA. I'm sure you know about his theories. I was wondering if he's suggesting that there's a lot of structures over there, life, moon base already, and there's a lot of technology that hasn't been shown.
The question is about Richard Hoagland. I don't know if you're all familiar with him and the work he's done, and Mike Barra of enterprisemission.com, if you want to check it out. Richard Hoagland has a very strongly held view. He did work for NASA, he worked for Walter Cronkite, as he keeps telling us. He's a respected journalist and author. He's written several books. The most recent one is The Secret History of NASA. It's a good read. His view is that we did get to the moon, and that NASA are suppressing the real information that was discovered there. That there are ancient structures on the moon that are